Good morning, everyone. My name is Sonia Holtz. I'm your CFWC Communications Chairman. Welcome. Today is all about parliamentary law and your first days as a parliamentary chairman or a parliamentary member of an officer, whatever it is that they call you in your club. It is also for a club, district, and state, so everyone is welcome. So without any further ado, we're going to introduce our CFWC parliamentarian, Joyce Jordan. Is our parliamentarian for the state. Welcome, Joyce.
Thank you. It's nice to be with all of you this morning. And thinking back to my first time as a parliamentarian, my first response was, I was flattered to be asked. And then I got home afterwards and thought, what in the world did I do? What did I say yes to doing? Well, it's been an interesting ride over the years. It's been wonderful. I've been doing this now for a long, long time. And first I did it as a volunteer, and it's still as a volunteer. However, I did it without much more than the version of this little book. And actually, that's the main thing you should do as one of your first moves, is go out and buy this book. It will answer the majority or 99.9% of all the questions you'll ever come in contact with. Later on, as I'd been doing this, I did study and become part of the National Association of Parliamentarians. And I tell people, you know, you may not think so, but I do know what I'm talking about. So let me first start by telling you the basic rules and principles of parliamentary procedure. And some of you have heard this before many times, but each time I read it and go over it, I learn something new. The first rule is the organization is first. The decisions of the organization are the important decisions. It's not your opinion, it's not their opinion, but it's our opinion as an organization. The power of any meeting is in the hands of the members. Not you, not me, but us together. And all members of the organization have equal rights. You have the right to participate in all meetings and all discussions of the organization. Now, there are limits to that. There are times the organization will have a committee meeting, and some of those committee meetings are closed. That means that decisions they make have to be ratified, and there are procedures for doing these things. And why can't I say minimum? A minimum number of the members are required to make a decision. That's called a quorum. And I have a friend, another parliamentarian, who describes the quorum should be established for an organization as the lowest number of members that can attend and reasonably be expected to attend on the stormiest night of the year. Now that sounds rather silly in a way, but many times there are extenuating circumstances. The members can't all be there, but you do need a minimum number to attend, and that's your quorum. One that I see abused, misused all the time is you can have only one motion on the floor at a time. Only one motion at a time. Now, have you been part of a group where we've been really in a good discussion and we're discussing this motion to purchase a new television set? And with that, we've talked about it, we know what we want, and somebody said, I saw those television sets on sale on QVC for $1.99, and I move that's another motion. That's out of order. You can amend this motion to include it, but you cannot have two motions on the floor at the same time. Another thing that has happened, and I've seen it happen, is we have the motion, and let's use that silly television set again, that 3 members want. We really don't need a television at this time, but 3 members want it. And they said, that's my telephone, and I tried for an hour this morning to get it turned off and I couldn't, so we're ignoring that. The 3 members want to buy this new television set and they say, I move. Somebody else from the group says second, the 3rd member says question. And so now we've got to vote on a question. That's not right. We need the opinion of everyone, everybody. So we have to have full debate before we act. And our motions usually need a majority vote to pass. There are some circumstances where you need 2/3 vote or a larger majority. And the reason for that, a simple way to remember what needs that 2/3 motion, 2/3 vote, is it takes away the rights of the members. One of the ways that it would take away, need a 2/3 vote is calling the question. It limits the right of a member to talk. It's important to remember 2/3 vote to take away the right, that will take away the rights of a member. Another one that's a really good one, and you're going to see this abused as a parliamentarian or even as a member of the club, is my television now. Enough people didn't want it that they voted it down. And later in the meeting, those 3 people that really wanted that television have gotten together and said, well, I've got a new way. Let's move to not to purchase a new television, but to explore the need of the organization to enhance their their skills or their communication skills, and by investing in electronic equipment, for example, I can't make a motion this morning. It's getting too complicated, and we want our motions to be simple. But we've got the same television they still want to buy. They voted it down, so they rewrote it, and in the same meeting, they make that motion again. What do? Can't do that. That's a no-no. You cannot bring back the same motion once defeated in the same meeting. By the same token, you cannot bring that same motion back again in another form to vote it down. Once decided by that meeting, it is the decision of that meeting and it sticks. They're not going to want to waste time voting on the same thing over and over again. As we talked, a majority motion, a majority decides the motion. Always the majority. If you have 100 people, your majority is 51. You can't have 50. That's a tie. The president has to break the tie. You can't have 49 and say, well, it was close, so it's passed. You need the majority. That's one number, once established, is the number, and you have to stick to it. We talked about 2/3 vote. Again, 2/3 is, I want to give you some examples of that. Taking away the rights of a member, changing the rules of debate, closing nominations, or changing previous decisions without notice. To rescind something, now I'm using words that I wasn't going to use today, we have to give our members previous notice. We don't make big decisions as an executive committee or as a board of your clubs without giving the members notice that this is taking place. We don't have a vote on the bylaws without telling the members, this is what we're going to vote on today. They have the right to be there. This affects them. They have the right to know, and we have to tell them when it's happening. The other basic rule is silence gives consent. You don't speak up, you're letting somebody else make the decisions. Your opinion matters. It's really important that our members speak up. And I know some people are scared to think if I disagree with them, they're never going to like me and they're never going to ask me to come back. It may be a little threatening at times when yours is the unpopular opinion. But if you don't speak up, you're saying, well, I guess I'm not that important, and then you don't have to listen to me no matter what I say. So go ahead and do what you want. In voting, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. And you do not have to ask for abstentions. That's often confused. Abstentions don't count. An abstention says, I'm not voting. And what that does is changes the majority or the 2/3 vote. Silence says, I don't care enough to vote, or I can't decide, so let them decide. Silence gives consent, and that's why it's so important. And you don't have to include that in your minutes. It's those that voted yes, voted aye, and those that voted no. And the way to remember how to say that, it's the ayes and the noes. Now, at this point, does anybody have any questions for me? Raise your hands, and there's a hand.
We have a question from Rachel. Rachel, you have a question, please?
I kind of have a lot. I'm not sure how to pose the question yet. So my first question is, if something was voted on in, okay, I know what my question is. Does the board have the right to say the majority, or what is that term that we always use? Board recommended, because it kind of implies that when they presented it in the past, board recommended that that the 9 people up front basically have their stamp on it. And when I was sitting out there, I really didn't understand what they were saying, so I just vote. Shouldn't it be, my question is it appropriate, or is it the procedure to have the members hear whatever is going on first, and then the board do a discussion, and then we could say what happens? Or what is the actual process? Is it the board making a board recommendation every single time, or is it the members, somebody has a motion, then we present it to the membership, they vote, and then the board, I feel, should then discuss and go, okay, and then bring it back? What is the process?
Okay, let's talk about that. The board has a recommendation. A recommendation is in effect a motion.
Yes.
And if it's and we can call our motions many things, but it comes down to, it is a motion from the board. The board moves the resolution. It does not need a second because it's been discussed by a committee, which means more than one person wants to hear this. At that point, the presiding officer will say, the recommendation is there any discussion? At that point, if there's any discussion, you hear the discussion, and you should hear that pro and con alternating. When that discussion stops, it's time to vote. And that means the membership, if they vote in favor, the membership likes this resolution or this recommendation, and we're going to act on it. But if the membership votes against it, they don't have to put their rubber stamp on anything.
Okay.
The board makes a recommendation, you discuss it, and you vote on it. And there it becomes the will of the majority of the board.
Okay. I guess really my question is, because of COVID, we didn't have a dean last year. There was a lot of things that we didn't have. So the board kind of got in the habit, I'm going to say, of everything was a board recommendation. And usually only 1 or 2 people would submit things. So what is the process? How does the membership actually voice their opinion? I know that we submit our request and all those things. Is there a way to tell our board, you don't have to recommend everything? Because it intimidates our membership, and they always want us to write I am the president, and I am dealing learning from some of the older members. I'm trying to get the information correct and how we actually do it. There's a lot of different opinions.
COVID has messed up a lot of things, but it still comes down simply to, once you hear that recommendation, you have the discussion. And how the board comes up with the recommendations, if they've heard from individual members, if they sent a note to them, if they called them and said, it still is a board recommendation. It's not automatically passed. It has to be acted on by the membership.
Okay. Can I call you after this meeting? I have a really...
Yes, of course you can. Do you have my phone number?
No, I don't. May I have it?
Yes, of course.
You know what? I'm going to suggest that we don't say that over the internet. If
Let's
Rachel, we will make sure you get that. Okay.
Thank you.
I don't pick up all the time, but I do really have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. We're going to move on to the next question or comment. It's with Debbie. Debbie, you have a question or comment?
Actually, it's a question that came in from chat, and I don't want to presume to answer it. So the question is, when you're having a discussion on a motion, is it limited to three pros and 3 cons? Is there a limit to how much you go back and forth?
That depends on the organization and the situation. If it's a convention, many times in your standing rules for the convention, they'll say debate is limited to 10 minutes. Speeches are limited to 1 minute. If you have a place where it's written that it is limited, you have to stick by that because you vote on the standing rules of a convention. And it takes a 2/3 to pass that because it takes away the rights of the members. So in a convention or in a meeting, unless you have someplace in your bylaws or standing rules that debate is limited to 3 pros and 3 cons, it is not limited to that. That's why when people get sick of it, they call the question. But we could talk from today till tomorrow, unless it's written someplace and passed by 2/3 of the membership that debate is limited, it is not limited. Answer your question?
I'm sure it answers their question. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you so much. Was there anyone else that had a question before we continue? Yes, one more, Rachel.
Can you hold a general meeting without a parliamentarian? That's just simple. Yes or no?
I guess if there were 3 people there, you probably couldn't. But the 3 officers necessary are a presiding officer to run the meeting, the secretary to record the minutes or what happened during the meeting, and the parliamentarian. Now, if your elected or appointed parliamentarian is not there, as presiding officer, you can say, Debbie, will you serve as parliamentarian pro tem for this meeting?
Pro tem.
Pro tem. Just for this meeting, you're the parliamentarian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question or comment is coming from Debbie.
And again, this came to me in chat, and it's, does the membership need to approve all motions? Can the board make a motion, approve, then advise the membership?
No.
That's an easy answer.
Easy answer, no. The power is in the membership. It's not in the board. It's not in the elected officers. And actually, the term for that is the membership ratifies the actions of the board. You're their agents. You're not them. They decide, you don't.
I know that in my club, the bylaws state that the board has the authority to spend X number of dollars for house repairs. They have the authority to do that on their own. So we notify the membership when we do that. But anything above that has to go to the members, no matter how important. It's got to go to the membership for approval. So they can recommend, but the membership has to approve.
And spending money, if it's covered in the budget, that's already voted on because you voted on the budget. The membership decided the budget. Okay, another question?
No, thank you very much. Does anyone else have a question? I don't have anyone else in line. If not, Joyce, go ahead and move to your next topic.
Well, the next thing we're going to talk about is how to make a motion. And somebody wants to make a motion, and there's a procedure for making motions. We hear it all the time. We don't motion that, we move that. But before we do anything, the person who wants to make the motion needs to stand, raise their hand, whatever, but get the attention of the presiding officer. They need recognition. At that point, the presiding officer says, I'm going to use Debbie, she's the first face I see here. Debbie, all I need to do is say a name, or if I don't, the speaker or the speaker. That's called assigning the floor. At that point, the motion is made, and it's I move that, not I motion that, or I want us to, or I think we should. It's I move that. Now we know that one person really wants to do something, but nobody else in the crowd does. You know how you stop the motion right there? You don't say anything. Unless the motion receives a second, doesn't come to the floor. But somebody does want to hear this. So they say second, they don't need to be recognized. They just need to say second. And I guess I'm going to interrupt myself and say that does not need to be in the minutes. The name of the person that makes the motion needs to be in the minutes, but the name of the person who seconds that does not need to be. And a way to remember that one is if you want to save time in writing the minutes, you forget the seconds. Next, the president will state the motion by saying it has been moved and seconded that we blah, blah. Okay, it's been moved, it's seconded. And before this all has to happen before there's any debate. Too often we see the discussion first, the decision made first, and then we make the motion. Let's back it up. Let's start with the motion. Let's state the motion. Let's get the motion seconded, and then we start the debate. And the presiding officer will say, is there any discussion? Is there any debate? And that's when we talk about it. We talk about the pros, the cons, the reasons we want to, the reasons we don't want to, the benefits of anything we want to talk about is open during that time. Well, we can't. And another thing during that time, and this is an aside, we always have to remember to be kind. We're talking about the motion. We're not talking about the maker of the motion. We're not talking about the person who seconded the motion. We're not talking about, we don't use names. We don't use names. We don't say to somebody, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. We don't say, Sally, I can't believe you made such a dumb motion. We can't say, Sally, what a wonderful idea. We talk about the issue at hand. We don't talk back and forth if this one says yes and this one says no, and they start a discussion between the two of them. No, we don't do that. We make our remarks. We address them to the presiding officer. It keeps it in order. It keeps it in manageable. It keeps the discussion manageable. And you know, one of the things we think and wonder about, well, this all must be just a waste of time. Well, it's not. It actually saves time. We need to have our motions first and then our discussions. And after the debate has gone on and suddenly nobody wants to talk anymore, the presiding officer says, is there any further debate? And nobody says anything. She will ask, are you ready for the question? What question? Are you ready for the question? The question is what the motion. The motion is called the question. At that point, she repeats it. The motion we are voting on, the motion 2, and repeats it word for word. And then she says, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. And she declares whether the ayes have it, the noes have it, the motion is passed, or the motion is lost. And then we go on to the next question or the next motion. And the way they put this in Robert's Rules of Order is seeking recognition. That's the person wanting to be recognized, assigning the floor, the presiding officer calls on that person, making the motion, the seconding of the motion, stating the motion, the debate, putting the question or taking the vote, and announcing the results. Sounds rather complicated in a way when you break it down that way. But when you're going through it, it's really a very orderly progression. Now, I'm ready for questions again.
All right, everyone. Anyone have any questions or comment about this section she was just discussing? See, Joyce, you're so good at this. No one has any questions.
Amazing.
All right, why don't you just, what's your next section, please?
Well, my next section is there are many materials available. And one of the things that I couldn't put it in Dropbox or anything that you could pull this up and print it. It comes from the National Association of Parliamentarians. And my study group was very generous and bought a bunch of these for me at one point. And I hand them out when I see you in person. But it covers everything. It really does. Starting with procedure for handling a motion, principles, rules for debate, ranking motions. And would you believe motions are ranked? You can do many things once that main motion is made. You can amend it, you can debate it, you could kill it, which is an interesting process. You can delay voting on it. And there are rules for that. And then we have incidental motions. All these are available in this. And next time I'm with all of you or some of you, I will have copies of this with me. So if you want one, come to me. Many of you have already gotten them. And I buy them. I'm not asking my study group to buy more for me, but I buy them and I would be glad to share them with you. It's really a valuable resource. And I think as non-members, you can go to the National Association for Parliamentarians and find these. They're called Basic Parliamentary Information. And you might want them for your club. If your club is having some problems, if your district is having some problems, and that gets me into another thing. Don't let anybody say Robert's Rules of Order says this, so therefore we can't. Without having the knowledge, the resources, say, prove it. Show me. Because I've seen it done more than once. We can't use the Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure as a weapon. Okay, so if you, it would be good to order these. You can get from them that it's National Association of Parliamentarians.com and go there and there's a store, you could order them. The other thing that I use a lot, Robert's Rules of Order is now at its 12th edition. It came out in 1879, I think the first one was written by a man whose last name was Robert. He had a meeting, he got involved in it, and it was a shouting match. He who shouts loudest gets his own way. We've seen that happen in clubs and other organizations, and we don't want that. He wrote this as a 79-page pamphlet, sold it for 10 cents. He sold out. There's my phone again. I bet it's selling. He sold out of those things, and we're now on the 12th edition. And with that, a member of Mr. Roberts' family is still a member of the parliamentarians who writes the book and edits the book. I put mine in a binder. But that's what it looks like. And those of you that want to study further, go for it. Find a study group, and they do exist. Debbie Petrosco is part of one. Some of the people on this site are part of the one I'm in, but they exist in different parts of the state. And not all of them are through women's clubs. They're through different organizations. So find one, start studying. They're a valuable group. They help. I lost my thought. The phone ringing did that to me. Because not only was my house phone ringing, so was my arm. As another aside, I got this thing because my niece told me I had to get it. And she called my daughter, and then my daughter told me I had to get it because it's if you fall, it will call the paramedics for you. And since you're older than dirt, Mom, you need that. I bought it. Anyway. Study groups are available. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. There are many books on parliamentary procedure. There are many authors. I've looked at many of them. I've purchased several of them. And the one I always go back to is Robert. It's a valuable resource, and I go back to it. Barnes & Noble's carries it. So do many other places. Like I said earlier, the main one that I find helpful for small clubs is the in brief. A couple other tricks that I use that might be helpful in your clubs and your parliamentarian, or if not with your parliamentarian, with whoever you have sitting next to you during your meetings that is helpful, is when things are going, and since Barbara has shared this with people, I will share it too. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said anything. When everything is going just really swell, you sit there, you don't do anything. But if you see that presiding officer wandering into an area where she could get in trouble, all of a sudden by your place is a yellow card. Nobody else can see it, but she can say it. And it says, slow down. Take a deep breath here. It's time to re-examine where we're going with this. And if you're being ignored, the red card goes on top of it, which is saying to her, you really better stop. Nobody else knows that's happening, but it's a way to help her keep things in order. The cards are helpful. And the reason you do that, instead of saying, hey, Barbara, you better stop. I'm using Barbara as an example. She's sitting right up there. Is that your job as the parliamentarian is to make the presiding officer look good. It's not your job to show how much you know. It's not your job to show how good you are. It's your job to help the presiding officer look good. And if I was in the back of the room where I shouldn't be to begin with, I should be sitting next to her. It's not your job from the back of the room to shout out, hey, you better stop there, headed for trouble. You don't want to do that. You want your presiding officer to look like the best presiding officer in the whole world. You want the presiding officer, and she's our organization. presiding officer is our representative to the community. And if you can do something to make that presiding officer look like the most best possible presiding officer, the best one in the whole world, that's it. That's what we want representing us, right? We don't want somebody saying, well, she only looks good because her parliamentarian tells her what to do. That's the wrong way to look at this. You're the mouse in the corner that nobody sees and nobody knows, sitting there silently to the best of her ability. And there are times you can't, because the presiding officer will say, would you please stand up and address that? But aside from that, you should be the silent, unseen person. Now, I love a microphone. Some days it's really hard not to say, Barbara, give me that microphone. Or during some of the reports to say, hey, I want to talk to that. And especially during bylaws voting, to say, I want to talk to that, but you can't do that. We have to be silent. You have to be the mouse in the corner. It's to make the organization, it's to make the organization, it's to make the president, it's to make the officers, to make everybody else look really good. And the quieter you are, the better you're doing your job. So at that, any more questions?
Thank you, Joyce. Anyone that has a question, please raise your hand. We have a question from, is it Roxanne?
Yes, it's Roxanne. What was the name of that first publication you showed that was a 2-page flyer? Yes, that one. What is that name?
Basic Parliamentary Information.
Basic Parliamentary Information.
Yes.
And again, would you tell me where you ordered that publication?
I ordered it at the National Association of Parliamentarians.org.
Okay.
It's .org, isn't it, Ellen?
The actual web address is www.parliamentarians.org.
Thank you, Ellen.
Just www.parliamentarian.org.
Parliamentarians, plural.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank you. I apologize for stepping in. Did you have a response? I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Ellen, for helping me. But I see you have a question.
Yes, ma'am. When you, as a parliamentarian, are sitting silent, that also means that you're not supposed to vote in a verbal or a hand raised vote. Is that correct? Only as a ballot, same as the chairperson, correct?
In many organizations, the parliamentarian does not have a vote. It depends on what you put in your bylaws. In some of the organizations, the parliamentarian does have a vote. It's stated in the bylaws. If she's an elected officer, it changes. But the parliamentarian ordinarily does not make motions and does not vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Were there any additional questions at this time? All right, back to you, Joyce.
Actually,
I'm sorry, we do have, ladies, I'm going to have to remind you to the one share, one question rule. We've been asked to keep to that rule so that everyone in the room can be part of the workshop. We will be sharing Joyce's personal information so that you can find her when you need to find her after this meeting. Was there anyone that hadn't asked a question so far that would like to share or ask a question? Yes, Wendy.
thank you, Madam Parliamentarian Joyce. I wonder if you might give some information about study groups. I know in my home district, we have done that with many of the presidents or interested club members to come and take the opportunity to learn more about proper parliamentary procedure. And we're not expecting people to become able to take the parliamentarian test to be certified. We're talking about basic general knowledge. And we have found, I know our district parliamentarian is currently on the call this morning, and we've done that for about the last 4 years, and it's a good way to share information.
You're right, Wendy. It really is a good way to share information. That it's and it's great fun. You get to know the people involved in the group. And one thing CFWC does is if any member of our organization completes 20 hours of study, which is pretty easy to do if you're part of a group, because you meet and you have your lessons and you prepare your lessons before you get there. We give certificates of achievement to those people. There's one, I think there's one in Sierra Colega. You're part of Riverside. There's one in Ventura, the TAD district. I think there's one in Northern California in the San Ramon, Dublin area. I don't know all of them, but they do exist, and start calling around. And may I advertise myself a bit?
Of course.
Okay, I also do workshops. And I've gone to districts and clubs to do them. It lasts more than an hour or 45 minutes, whatever. We cover the basic rules. We use this, we employ skits, whatever. And the ones attending become part of the cast of the skits. And I'm glad to do that. If you would like me to come to your district or your club, let me know. Like I said, I like microphones. I like to travel. I'm available.
What a fantastic offer. Thank you. We do have a question or comment from Stephanie Stark. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. It's a bit of a comment and also a question. I've been part with Wendy of this parliamentary study groups. I'm now district parliamentarian. As such, we reach some people, and the basic information is something that needs to be shared in clubs with club members, and that's great. But when it comes to getting people out to really participate and learn, you get a few people and they immediately forget what they learned. I'm sorry to say, Wendy, some of them just forget. But I'm looking for a way to involve people in a meaningful, rather than just a study group, a group that studies it in context. I'm looking to do maybe a workshop that would involve not only club presidents, but other people who preside at meetings, and run a workshop that is like a meeting that would involve them in the nuts and bolts, rather than just a book or that type of study, because unless it's in action, they see it in action, they don't use it. And I'm also concerned that protocol, which is again part of our territory, has been lost, especially over the last several years with COVID. And I'm looking for a way to get people to understand the good manners that are protocol. And I thought perhaps you might have some suggestions.
Well, that's a complicated one to begin with. Your study group meetings. You follow Parliament procedure during them.
Sure.
You call the meeting to order. You have an order of business. You prepare, have an agenda. And that's a lesson to everyone there. You,
Right. But
You
I
start
want
with
them
it.
involved in doing
well, yeah,
as well.
in doing, way back when, and I'm going to mention a couple of names, when I started looking for a study group in my area, I went to a meeting and skipped out on something else that I really should have been at to go to it. And they said they would find another day that hopefully would work for everybody so I could attend. They wanted me to be part of this, which was very nice of them. They came back by the next month saying we found another place, and they gave me a different time for the meeting. We've found another date. And the one thing that way that you better start coming, because the meetings are now going to be at your house. Well, that worked. We got to the end of that term of officers and they said, and you're now president. I said, you've got to be kidding. Some of you may recognize a couple of names from the past, and Chris Olson and Erna Kramer were part of that. Yes, they were part of that. And I said, I can't be, I'm just starting this. You know, my other experiences are long ago. And well, the one was current, and they said, you're never going to learn the fine points of this. We had a more supported group than this one. And they were right. They were very supportive. You'll learn because we're here with you to help you. And what you don't know, we'll help you find it. It's not what you don't know. It's what you don't know that's going to get you.
Every time.
Every time. So you need to find a supportive group. And the way to do that is to sit down with a group and just have fake meetings. And the agenda for that is also, you can find a sample of agendas. And there's a common order. Call to order, opening ceremonies if you have them, approval of members, reports of the officers, reports of standing committees, and on down the list. And you go through that every single time you meet. They become involved. You get your members by getting them involved. You don't conduct the meeting. You don't do everything about the meeting. And one thing I do recommend is during that meeting, you also take a break. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, coffee's ready, and we sit down and we get to know each other. So it's more than just the information, it's also building the community. And I think if you do those two things, you can have a successful group.